This greenhouse has revolutionized how I garden. After several years of researching and now a year of experimenting, I can't wait to share with you what I've learned and how this greenhouse has become the heart of my urban garden. Before I built this greenhouse, I relied on simple setups and really well-known setups like raised beds or like vertical planters or growing vertical, which are great. I also was able to start plenty of seeds indoors, just using a simple wire rack like a lot of people do with some grow lights. And what I started though realizing is I needed somewhere where I could grow a lot more year round, something that had enough space to continue producing 90% of my food. I started imagining a space where, I could do a whole lot more than just start some seeds and get some little plants going that I could eventually transplant out into the garden. I needed more than just more space. I started to realize that I really needed a greenhouse, if it was possible, that would be able to grow food year-round. Like grow vegetables and herbs and root vegetables. Be able to grow tomatoes like I do out here and in the garden during the summer. I needed a really functional greenhouse. And this greenhouse checked all the boxes. It handles the extremes of winter, and boy, they can be extreme here in Chicago, sometimes getting as cold as 40 below zero Fahrenheit, and with wind chill. So you're talking really extremes, as well as it can get well into the 90s, again, Fahrenheit, in the summers. And this greenhouse can handle it. It has insulated panels. The panels transmit lots of light. Because they're insulated, it can hold in a lot of that warmth that's created by the light. It also shields everything in here from the extreme winds that we also get, hence the nickname for Chicago, Windy City. So while my goal was clear, wanting something more than like a hobby greenhouse, one of the things that was a key to my understanding, being a total noob to all of this greenhouse stuff, was the idea of active and passive, like the panels here in the greenhouse that, are insulated, the way that they hold in heat and let in all this light from the sun, right? That would be something that's passive. What I discovered was to really maximize the growing capability of the greenhouse was that I would also need some active systems. The reason why we're at the back of the greenhouse now is because this is sort of what you would call the control center. So if you're looking from over here, you see this long tube, and this is actually a fan that draws air down this tube and runs under the bed. It's hooked up to a thermostat, so it turns on only at certain times. And then this exhaust fan over here, if it gets too warm in here, this thermostat over here will turn it on, and that will cause a vacuum, if you will, in the greenhouse. So even if all the vents are closed and the doors closed, a vent down at the bottom of the greenhouse will open and it will exchange the air. And as you move along here, this is a timer that controls a fan that's mounted at the top of the greenhouse. And this turns on depending on the season at various times. It's mostly for circulation. As you move over here, you'll also see this little guy here. And this is how I monitor the performance of the greenhouse. Performance just means, relative to the outside ambient temperature. How is the greenhouse doing? And what this little device does is every hour it actually sends that information where I can pull it down on my computer or even look at it on my phone, so I can be anywhere in the world and I can monitor the performance of my greenhouse. The next thing that you'll notice moving over here is this thing that looks like a thermostat. And if you notice that and you thought that, you're right. That's exactly what it is. And this is actually hooked up to a very small, very efficient heater. And so when it gets really, really cold, it will kick on a little bit just to kind of keep the ambient temperature in here. Okay, so hopefully with some adjustments, you can kind of see a little bit better this tube here, and then down here, this tube that comes out of the bed over here. I want to dive a little bit more into this because this is a really big key of the active system. So if you remember, there's this big, large U-shaped bed that runs around the entire perimeter of the greenhouse. And that's key because it provides insulation, also obviously a lot of space to grow, right? And then I can grow up vertically from these beds, and then I have space to walk, and I can put planters in here and things of that nature. This one key to this active system is there's a fan here. This is just a little cover that's got some mesh on it to keep dirt and bugs out. How this works is when it gets warm in the greenhouse, hot air rises, the thermostat gets triggered, it draws the hot air down into here. There's that fan in here. That fan is pointed that direction, so it sucks that hot air down. It draws it down this tube, and then that snakes all around inside of these beds all the way to the end by the door there in this bed over here on my left. And then it comes all the way back and it snakes all the way around here. And then it goes all the way down there towards the door of the greenhouse on the bed on my right here. And then it snakes all the way back. And then over here, it pops out. And so what happens is that action heats up these beds almost like a battery. So not only does it warm the roots, but it warms the soil. And there's so much of that soil in there that it holds on and it retains that heat. And then hot air rises. So when it gets colder in the greenhouse, that vent over there starts to release some of that heat. And what happens is it really helps even that out. So these plants just really enjoy not having a lot of extremes. And so that active system within this greenhouse is really key to just this lush, beautiful growth. This journey this last year has been a lot of fun. But I'll be honest, it's also been, a lot of trials and tribulations. I've, never had a greenhouse before. And one of the lessons learned, when you have a controlled environment, there are actually far fewer things that will affect it. So for example, I planted basil and they didn't seem to be doing very well. What I didn't realize is they were doing perfectly fine. They were setting roots down and things like that. They just weren't doing a whole lot of growing above. But I haven't experienced that before, so I was like, oh no, something's not right. Maybe it was the timing, maybe it was the variety. I had no idea. So like a lot of good gardeners, I simply sowed more basil seeds, transplanted those into the greenhouse. Just a few weeks later, the original ones that seemed to be limping along started to grow quite rapidly. And that's why you can kind of see in here that I've got a lot of basil. The other thing that I learned through suddenly seeing things flower is that it's super important that I have both those active and passive controls in the greenhouse, and I'm able to monitor it. and see when those things are maybe happening. So although I was a little late to the party, so to speak, this year, I was able to get a shade cloth up. Once I got that shade cloth in place, I was really concerned that, you know, I had these big, beautiful tomato plants that were doing quite well, and I was like, oh no, my tomatoes are going to hate this. Well, something that really surprised me, maybe you all know it, I didn't know this, is that tomatoes actually like to grow in a little bit of shade. That blew me away. And what was happening is they were getting like the perfect environment because the greenhouse was doing so well on all those other fronts. Once I put that shade cloth on, we had more tomatoes than we knew what to do with. And so I canned and canned and canned Roma tomatoes, and which is wonderful. It's a good problem to have, right? But that was one of the big learning lessons. And having that extreme heat, you know, this following year, I'll get that shade cloth on a little bit sooner because I'm not afraid of that. And I might try some different things with ventilation. Another challenge that I had was the humidity in here when everything's closed up and there's not a lot of sunlight. I had some humidity issues. So this year I might try actually hooking up maybe some kind of a humidity monitor that can trigger the fan to just briefly turn on. That might be a bad idea. It might, you know, get too cold in here. Another idea that I have is just a very small dehumidifier, which doesn't take up a lot of electricity and actually will generate a tiny little bit of heat. So I might try that as well. Oh, and that was another one as well, is I didn't have this fan that's at the top here of the greenhouse. And that meant if the exhaust fan wasn't running, or even the little tiny fan on the GAT system, the geothermal system, the air here wasn't moving around. When I figured that out and saw some bigger commercial greenhouses utilizing these big giant fans in the top and pulling air up and pushing it out around the greenhouse, that kind of a light bulb went off, and I put that in here, and that's helped out tremendously. So that was a really big one. But it's just been amazing having all of the bountiful harvests in here. I think definitely one of the most rewarding parts of a greenhouse is being able to come out here and harvest even when it's freezing outside, and, you know, pull something together maybe for dinner tonight. Man, what a game changer. I just can't imagine my urban garden without this. It's just been so rewarding. Therefore, I would highly encourage you that if you've been even just considering it a little bit, dream a little bit more and take that leap. I don't know what I would do without a greenhouse. It has really become a cornerstone of my urban gardening system. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to see more, please give me a like, subscribe to my channel, and let me know in the comments if you're thinking about building a greenhouse or having one built, or you're in the research stages, or if there's just any questions you have. Thanks again so much for watching, and until next time, happy gardening.